Vamos retomar os nossos trabalhos desta tarde. Peço para que retornem aqui para o auditório. Coloquem os seus fones, já que nossas palestras são silenciosas. Preciso que todos estejam de fone para que possam acompanhar o conteúdo.
Content. This is the last panel of the International Coffee Seminary of Santos. We're going to have our closing ceremony dinner at the fish market from Santos that is right here, 2 blocks away from here. We're going now for our final panel, Reinaldo Pires from Coffee Co International. I would also like to call Alex Perk, Head of Coffee in Europe at Comex in Group. Alejandro Flórez, Regional General Director from ICOM Agroindustrial. And Mr. Danilo Pucci, CEO of Volcafé Brazil. I would like to call our mediator, Octávio Pires. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, dear friends. Please put your headphones on. So remember to put your headphones on so that you can follow the lecture, the talk.
To do this in English because it's a little bit more comfortable for our participants. They are all great traders from great companies, and we expect to provide a good discussion about several topics involving coffee, market, and also involving some ideas about the future, about what each one thinks on few topics. As a mediator here, I prepared a couple of questions, and I will open the question, and some can can come and really answer, and then we see how it evolves. It should be a quick talk in around each topic. So let's start. A very open question: are we experiencing a structurally different market, or just another extreme coffee cycle? Who goes for it?
I'll go for it. So, first of all, thanks. A pleasure to be here with all of you guys. And I really liked the previous panel with Santana, with Oscar, with Claudio, and they really anchored, and perhaps Santana summarized towards the end, that everybody is in a way working with a lot of coffee coming and numbers amongst different players and peers at relatively close numbers. Yeah. But there is one thing that it's given, and it's for sure, and we can see already evidence of, that we're going to see a lot of coffee coming on this coming crop. And perhaps we're not talking about extremes. Perhaps the lack of coffee right now gives that impression. But what we are perhaps as a word is we're experiencing an inflection point of 5 years of deficit, where we already see a horizon where we're going to see a little bit more coffee, but that hasn't materialized, and we're going to have a very interesting few months until this inflection point and the variables that command them evolve and come true.
I think that we were coming from the contango market, and the contango was really bringing folk to what we were seeing. there were more structural and profound issues that were affecting the supply of coffee. Until we have the issue in Brazil with the weather, we realize that those issues were really affecting the supply for the future. And there are other issues that still are pending to be solved, like the labor availability, the new generation of coffee growers in many countries, and of course weather variability, that now we have El Niño, but in countries like Colombia we have La Niña 3 times in the last 5 years. So that's what shows is like that the market in the supply has some fundamental issues. While on the other hand, despite prices going or twice or almost triple at some moment, the demand is resilient. So if you see this cycle is different to others. We see still the fundamental issues are there. So
can I make a little?
Great. I was asking if you have anything to add.
So I agree with a little bit everything that's been said. I'm leaning a bit more towards where Danilo is. I think we see evidence of a bit of both, actually. We are seeing some structural changes in the way that, our clients are sourcing their coffee and how the way the supply chains are developing. But I also think we have experienced probably one of the most extreme cycles that we've seen in the last 30 years. I do believe that these cycles will become more predominant as we move forward, and perhaps even more extreme. So that hence also the inflection point. So we are kind of at a crossroads in that sense.
Well, great. Thank you. Another question for you. What has changed most in coffee trading in the last 5 years?
Well, weather for one, and I'm sure we're going to touch more on this. We're seeing more and more extreme weather events, and more frequent. Capital requirements, without a doubt, working capital usage, cost of financing, these are all in the forefront. The velocity of information, technology, information is now accessible to everyone, and this is also leading to more volatility in our day-to-day lives, and be this in interest rates, currency, or even the flat price of coffee. Particularly, we've seen this in the last 5 years, and I think we will continue to see this as we move forward.
Well, okay. No, well.
Okay. You?
No, one of the big things was the stocks at destination. When you see, we were living in a very comfortable zone with huge stocks. If a roaster has an issue with quality in the U.S., he called 3 traders, and there were 10 samples. He was choosing from where to take and then bid and get the coffee. Now, the supply chain has become very lean, and perhaps that's something that is going to stay, because that's efficiency as well, because of use of capital. And so that requires for us to become more precise. There is no room for errors, so precision has become one of the name of the games.
Very good. I'll agree with both of you guys and perhaps build on that. First with Alex, the speed of information is certainly a new feature. And the speed of information, how perhaps that translates into the evolution on a market such as Brazil, is that today, to generate all that data, to cater with all that speed of information, we need more agile infrastructure, we need more technology embarked on our business. And I feel that coffee, in a way, is evolving to be a little bit more similar to a grains business in a place like Brazil, given its scale and so on. We see large investments from several players, Café also being one of them. And these investments are positioning individuals to have a lower cost of operation, to have much more information, to have much more automation, and to react quicker, to serve customers faster at a lower cost, to be more competitive. So that's one big transformation that I see. Yeah. And I don't see that also on the exporter side, but I also see all the technology and information dramatically changing the landscape at the farm level. The part of the effect of that is that Brazil becomes more efficient, lowers its cost of production, and by lowering its cost of production becomes much more competitive worldwide. And in 4 or 5 years of high prices, such as what we experienced in the last few years, we see Brazil planting a lot of coffee. And our previous panelists, exemplified some of that, the increase in area and so on that we are seeing. And that will fundamentally change, or will continue to fuel a phenomenon of gaining of market share, of consolidation of the top largest players. Today, the 5 largest players in the planet produce close to 72-73% of the global output. This number 15 years ago was 60%. What's going to be this number in another 15 years? So I think these are 2 of the things that changed in the last 5 years, is more consolidation and infrastructure that drives speed of change.
Can I just ask a little question just to add on top of what Danilo said? And I don't disagree at all. I just sometimes wonder if some of these features are unique to the large, more efficient producing countries, but what about the rest? We always keep in mind, that the top 4 or 5 producers, which are clearly leading the charge on everything that Danilo has described. I do have some concerns about let's say, the less efficient or less voluminous producing countries in that sense, regarding infrastructure, investments in technology, et cetera, et cetera.
And I would add to this question the responsible sourcing that has changed a lot. So this is a new demand. Well, it's an old demand, but it increased a lot for the past 5 years.
Correct. Our global CEO, Tricio, has been in previous conference very vocal about the global coffee diversity, which is a little bit of the point you are touching here, Alex. And I think we all, as good coffee lovers and traders around the world, we do appreciate how diverse is this world, both in terms of production and in flavor. And these phenomena that we just described is indeed making a lot harder for places like Africa, where I spent a lot of time, to survive, to thrive, to react even to higher prices. You were mentioning in our previous conversation how at times a windfall of good prices like the one we had, how at times in a place like Brazil, which is more efficient, reaches the producer, and perhaps in other countries, less so. So I agree. The current evolution of things are making it a lot harder for these places. And to the point that Octávio made, Santana made the question if we're going to see UDR being, enforced. Yeah, there again, another factor that dramatically create bottlenecks for countries other than Brazil and Vietnam and a few others to be competitive in tomorrow's world. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was particularly thinking about Africa, and you took the hook with EUDR and the rollout and how that has been, and you can see the disparity amongst the leading producing countries versus Africa, for instance, which I've also had the pleasure, as Danilo had, to have worked a lot in that area.
Perfect. I think we covered. Do you want to add?
No, perhaps I'll throw back the question in Alejandro, so he could add
like that.
how all these factors are perhaps affecting Central America as a whole, that you are at the epicenter of it?
They are still there. The migration of labor to the U.S. or other places, and even at the beginning of the high prices, Central America's main concern was who is going to harvest the crop. And in Colombia today is the main concern, who is to replace the actual generation of producers. But even if you go down on the chain, who are going to be the pickers of the future? So that's really the big concern that we are seeing. So, and limit the growth of coffee and the expansion.
Yeah, the succession in Brazil after the frost and better prices was different from the past. We see second generations leading part of the business, but this has been perfect for them. How do you guys think, in case we have 5 or 6 years of a different scenario or more challenging for farmers, do you think that in Brazil this will continue? Because we were very happy that it started to happen in Brazil. But I have a doubt if it will continue. What do you think? It's more local.
Regarding succession particularly, I think we may see different scenarios in different parts of the world. As Alejandro was describing, Colombia may face a very different challenge in that sense versus Brazil. I think Brazil, in a certain way, is very unique because of the scale of the production and the scale that we see at farm level. We do see already issues in terms of succession in other parts of the world. Smallholder producers, children are not wanting to work on the farms anymore. They want to go to the big cities. So while I think it could be an issue, I think it will be different and very unique to geographical regions and certain parts of the world. Brazil, perhaps to a lesser extent. I think Africa, Colombia, perhaps to a larger extent. I think places like Southeast Asia have a certain tradition of already families working on the farms, may experience it slightly different. Hard to predict, but that's kind of what I sense, at least at the moment.
Perfect. Very good.
I concur with Alex. I think the only point of reflection that I'll add, and we discussed that briefly earlier, the last 5 years, and in Brazil by and large, there is today a farm has the ability to absorb a new generation. And a new generation is bringing more information, access to information, technology, which translates into efficiency. But also in the last 5 years, we have observed and seen a lot of experimentation at the farm. The farmer taking chances, being innovative, and that's all really good. The word of caution here, and perhaps a point of reflection, is we have, previous to these last 5 years of better prices or a windfall of good prices, we have experienced, and I remember my dad back in 2002 or so selling coffee at 100 reais, 105 reais, 30 cents per pound or thereabouts, yeah. And it was this generation of farmers that were forged to be very diligent in cost, to be to keep things simple, and that perhaps curb a certain amount of innovation also over time. But on the last 5 years, we have seen a lot of that. And it was all forgiven because we had this windfall of prices. So with a better production, with more coffee coming into the ground, with some of the numbers that were ventilated here, Santana, quoted 30 plus million bags on Robusta. What's going to be the crop of Arabica in 28? Yeah, there has been a lot of seedlings and coffee that went into the ground, as Oscar and Claudio outlined. And that will, bring potentially prices to a more normalized level and will require farmers that haven't perhaps experienced lower prices to be diligent in cost and to be more efficient. Yeah, so that's a word of reflection right now. We need to be innovative, but we also need to be super diligent in price. Brazil has a natural competitive advantage in terms of price, but that's only true if you continue to endure the times, the good and the difficult times. And we know that, the cycles will display some of that in the next few years. Yeah.
I know Danilo and I were debating this a little bit before our panel here, so we could probably go on for hours discussing this, but I don't disagree at all. I just think that all of these elements that Danilo described, they're very different in different parts of the globe, and you could perhaps say they're very unique to each country of origin. And in that sense, I think Brazil has a significant advantage over most of the other producing countries. I think that goes without saying.
Okay. I think we covered all the aspects of this question. My third question is, today the market seems nominal at various moments. How do you assess the difference between apparent liquidity and real liquidity?
Well, until today we have definitely a seller's market where the flat price needs to meet the producer's target profitability. And so like now the market this year, we have seen the market to come down for the first half, and the differentials in all origins are doing the job to meet that profitability target. So liquidity is still fragile as we see it. So it needs still it still is weighing more the lack of availability and the seller's confidence at the moment that the future crop that we are about to harvest.
Octávio, I'll attempt to offer a view that the day we're going to have real liquidity is the day that we will see on the C market moves, we're going to see differentials cracking as the market rallies. Yeah, that is real liquidity. That's when the market kind of, the willingness to sell off the farmer, right, comes through with a windfall of prices. And, make changes to the differentials and allow the industry and traders to surf this swing on differentials. For me, that's real liquidity. Today, what we are experiencing is perhaps apparent liquidity or nominal liquidity, where you see differentials rallying, with the market going up. You at times see, such as we have seen about 60, 70 days ago, we saw Robusta prices coming down on the back of, Brazil differentials, on Robusta coming down. So the real liquidity for me is when the market displays their typical characteristics of kind of like, differential movement, yeah? And that's what perhaps we're going to see in a horizon of 90, 120, 150 days, yeah? August, September onwards, once Conilon crop that we are, it's been harvested right now, comes in full swing. The Arabica, harvest is well advanced, and perhaps we're going to start to see, and it will be displayed, more regular, characteristics of a well-supplied market.
So I like how Danilo has described the real liquidity with the flow of physical coffee. I think that's very true. But I also think that liquidity, you can almost look at it in different ways. In a sense, you can separate the physical market, but then we've also got capital requirements for other things, such as margin calls and financing our overall operations. And this has become a very hot topic, especially in the recent years with the extreme volatility we've seen. I don't believe there's a company in this room that has not had this discussion at least once in the last few years. And I think, liquidity has improved across the sector at the moment in terms of, your lines are no longer stretched. You have a bit more buffer in order to operate. When we saw the market rallying extremely hard, at some point you may even have to step on the brakes because liquidity starts to become an issue in the sense of cash. So I think, just to add to what Danilo said, I think you can almost look at it in both ways. And cash requirements to fund our operations, this is a personal opinion, but I do expect the markets to continue to be volatile, which will ultimately also demand more cash. Of course, as the market comes lower, you become in a slightly more comfortable situation. But I think everyone always remembers, the last 12 months and how that stretched everyone's financing requirements. And I think this is something that we must always continue to pay attention to.
Very good. Well, the existence in the physical side of the coffee, existence is not the same of availability. because the coffees can be there, and the farmer, capitalized farmer, decide not to sell. And then existence is not availability. Availability is a combination of existence plus willing to sell. On financial market, it's easier, and what I really tried with this question was really to incentivize the physical and financial answers. So I think we covered that very well. Thank you. Does the futures market still fulfill its traditional role of hedging and protection? I'm referring to the volatility of differentials. The basis was terribly volatile these times. So who goes for it?
I'll attempt, and I'll offer a few more things for us to debate. I think the first, we are at a time where the sea and the coffees that are the certs that are destination are at incredibly low levels. We've seen them at zero, 20 or so, 30 or so years ago, and that generated similar volatility on premiums. But right now, them being very, very low, that essentially, if it's Honduras there, that changes the basis of everything that trades around it. If it's Brazil there, then Xmovin changes the base again of everything around it. So the fact that we don't have a pool of certified coffees that offer a stable weighted average differential allows for a lot of volatility on premiums. So that's something that it's a phenomenon of the specific moment of low certified coffees and liquidity that we're living in, and that we're going to be sorted at some point in time. The guess of our previous panel was about May next year. I don't disagree that much. I think it's going to take a while until the pipeline gets filled. And perhaps a few other topics that populated the discussion over the last few days for us to explore. And I can expand later a little bit about El Niño, because it has been a hot topic. But the willingness to sell off the farmer, when will that come? Yeah, and I'm sure you have an opinion on that. Octávio, I'd love to hear. The possible elections, and I don't think we should debate that because it's a little bit too early, but in the next 30, 60, 90 days, there will be a lot of evolution on that. We already know, and it's a little bit of a fact, that we're going to have larger crops coming. But I do believe that it does represent well. It is a good tool. It is the best tool that we have, but we do need better and well-supplied markets for it to be a more efficient tool. And what will drive the supply and what will drive the use are perhaps some of these elements that I threw into the mix here for us to discuss.
Well, I think so far the market has proved to be has provided liquidity and the prices and the structure was able to allocate the coffee where it was mostly needed. Right? Any excess was cleaned up by the market, either because of the inversion, either moving stocks from producers to consuming countries faster, perhaps than ever sometimes. And so I think until now it has done a good job, well, until recently, because now we are like in a different period because we are in the expectation of the biggest crop ever in Brazil. And so the market is reflecting more that what we are seeing at the moment. So what we are seeing at the moment is reflecting on the differentials. So until that crop that is going to be harvested really become a coffee flow, I think we will see that disconnection.
So I liked the fact that the certified stocks have come into the discussion here because a perfect hedge, in my opinion, is the ability for you to deliver your physical commodity or your physical asset against that futures contract. Now, I think the C contract has evolved a lot over the years, especially with Brazil now being a tenderable grade to the board. This is a relatively recent feature in our market, which I think makes it a more effective hedging tool. I'm always very cautious to not mix volatility with the effectiveness of hedging. I do believe that the C contract serves its purpose, but when we see these extremes like we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months, this all comes to question. It still, in my opinion, serves as the most effective tool we have today to manage our exposure and price. The more grades of coffee that potentially may become available to tender to the exchange will make it an even more effective hedging tool. There's always a debate whether that waters down the contract in a way, but I think there is a very strong connection between the two. The deliverability of your physical commodity versus the mechanism of hedge. So in that sense, yes, I think that that C contract is a very valuable hedging tool. I also think the C contract is evolving a little bit. You know, we have a new contract coming, which I believe starts in May 28, that will realign the contract with the Robusta contract we see in London. It will be a 10-ton contract. The pricing dynamics will become more in line, and it might simplify things. For some, it might make it more complex for others. But I do think that this is something very interesting also in our market.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in the group that will be confused with dollars per ton instead of cents per pound. It's going to take some time for me to get ready for that. On your indirect question, I think we're going to see more liquidity in 70 days. That's what I think. I might be wrong, but that's the point. Well, I'm very happy to hear from you guys that we have the right instrument to do the hedges, even having suffered a lot on these basis volatility. Good. Let's talk a little bit about what worries you most for the next 5 years? Climate, succession, financing, logistics, or consumption? I just maybe you have another concern, but let us know.
I would say, Octávio, all of the above. I think climate, Danilo has something that he'd like to show us, which I think is very interesting. I think I mentioned previously that climate, these events are becoming more frequent and they're becoming more extreme. I believe this is here to stay. We're also in a situation where there's a lot of geopolitical tensions around the world. This is a concern. How this will affect logistics, how this will affect interest rates, potential recession, so succession in our market. I think all of these are very, very, very relevant concerns. That's why, for me, I would say all of the above.
You didn't mention consumption. You didn't mention consumption.
I think
it's not a concern.
No, I think consumption, you know, we've been through some very interesting events from COVID to extreme volatility, and demand has been quite resilient, I would say, even at extreme prices. As everything, we could see demand shift a little bit, and we could see increases, decreases in certain pockets of the world. But I do believe that demand for coffee is largely resilient in that sense. Now that could create another concern in terms of availability and supply as we move forward, as demand continues to increase. So you could say demand in that sense could be a concern as well, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with well, there are like structural things that I think is weather variability or climate change and succession. With weather, well, we as an industry have been working with producers and research and development to have better varieties, to have new designs of the plantations, and to better off when bad weather comes. But still, we are exposed to extreme weather conditions, which are happening very often. So that's a structural thing that is going to happen, because I mean the statistics of the last 10 years doesn't help us that much to think positive, right? And the other thing is succession. And listen, again, I repeat on that, is because in the succession, who is coming next? It goes farther than the profitability of the farm. It's how you incentive the young people to see coffee as a business. And in Brazil, I have to acknowledge that I always admire the agro-industry. The first time I came here was like a really knowing agro-industry. But in countries like mostly the mild countries of the world, the families still are looking at their farm like a survival plot, not as an enterprise. So that's a big issue. So we have to start changing that, but it's at a slow pace. And so it's something hanging around.
Great.
Very good, thank you. I'm not very worried about consumption. And I will only be worried about consumption if we do see something very extreme in prices like we have seen in cocoa, which generated demand destruction, used for synthetic products, you know, and changes in the mix that will probably be harder to unwind. And with the advent of higher prices right now, there is a certain amount of synthetic coffee that already exists in trades, and that has increased in the margin, but hasn't dramatically changed the landscape. The succession, I think, is a phenomena that has been evolving and will continue to evolve. We debated, we understand some of the challenges, and that's what's generating a higher concentration on more efficient and larger regions such as Brazil. Hence, my biggest concern is climate, because with this higher concentration and events being more impactful, being more frequent, the concentration on smaller regions can make some of these events much more impactful and make the market much more volatile. I've prepared a slide that I request that we put it on the screen, please. Hi. If you could add the slide to the screen, I appreciate that. Very well, we'll get there. But the slide will essentially cover. Podiam colocar o slide, por gentileza, na TV? Muito bem. Thank you. Easier. So, essentially one of the topics that has been on the news, friends asking how that can impact coffee, if we're worried, if it's cocoa is worried, and so on. And this was one of the lies that we discussed with customers during our presentations here internally, and I thought it was pretty interesting for us to put it on the screen. And that essentially displays what is the impact of the El Niño. Right now we are at a turning point from a La Niña to El Niño. We are at neutral, and the forecast suggests that we should have either a moderate or a severe El Niño in the coming months. Obviously, this is a forecast to change, weather forecast to change very often. But the models typically, historically suggest we're going to see one of these events. So a moderate El Niño suggests a certain impact on both Arabic and Robusta. Severe El Niño, much larger impact. Over the last 10 years, a couple of El Niño events made conilon producers to be a lot more resilient, implemented irrigation, which suggests that if we do have an event, farmers will be able to protect their crops, and only a very severe El Niño could mean that pumps will get locked, wells will dry, and dams will dry, and that will create a much more impactful event. Once we look into this chart that is on the screen, we can see that Robusta gets typically much more affected than Arabica. Arabica production on a typical El Niño event in Brazil, we're going to see floods in the south of Brazil. We're going to see a lot of rainfall in Colombia, which typically in a first moment generates a better production or windfall of production. But a severe El Niño can generate excessive rains, which translates into a much different scenario. But once you look into the Arabica impact in essentially a very severe El Niño or super El Niño, the impact could be on the 5 to 10% range in terms of production. Once you look into Robusta, and you can see that the Espírito Santo, Bahia, some of the main conilon producing areas are on the screen, are on that dry yellow area. If you look into Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, first, second, and third largest Robusta producers, they're all in this area. And if we do have a very severe El Niño, we could see a much larger impact on Robusta than we do see in Arabica. And I thought it was interesting because there has been a lot of debate on the topic, because we do see a good potential in Arabica. We are talking about farmer willingness to sell, and we even see Arabica farmers talking about how El Niño could, change prices, and could potentially change prices indeed much more in Robusta than it is for Arabica. Yeah, and I'll leave you guys to expand further the discussion.
I'm a bit with you, Danilo, on this. If I had to pick one of all of those items you listed, Octavio, I would pick climate as the main one. I agree with Danilo said about the impacts of El Nino perhaps being more damaging on Robusta than Arabica. My only concern with that is how will that shift the supply and demand dynamics? You know, that will drive more demand into Arabica as a result, and then we could see a very different pricing dynamics as a result of that. That would be my larger concern for the Arabica side with El Nino. But climate for me is definitely very high up on the list.
Thank you. I will try to put some spice in this discussion. We saw the area expansion estimated in about 2% in Arabica and a little bit more in Conilons. Area expansion is different than new plantings because there are lots of new plantings being implanted. This is impacting the productivity. So in the very same area, we are producing much more coffee than before. This is a totally theoretical question. Would be this increment in production be enough to compensate part of the El Nino impact in the crop 27-28?
Good point.
I would say yes. I mean, the experience in, at least in, what we have seen in Colombia with La Niña and El Niño is that the younger the trees, they better support extreme weather. So yeah, that new plantations are going to compensate some of the reduction.
I also think, Octavio, that there has been a lot of work being done from a scientific point of view. Perhaps behind the scenes, we don't all see it, but there is a lot of work being done, more resilient varieties being planted. Perhaps some of these new plantings you're describing already have some of these new varieties. I'm unable to say whether the case is yes, but I do believe a lot of the research that is being done, these new plantings will be more resilient to weather impact. My concern, though, is always to what extent. You know, if a severe El Nino comes, you know, maybe we haven't achieved the scientific development we need to be that resilient. I would expect if a severe El Nino comes this year, that there will be some pretty strong impacts. As Danilo mentioned, perhaps more in Robusta than in Arabica. So I think the science and the research behind this is key to this question. I don't have a concrete answer, but this is just what I'm thinking at the moment.
I'll offer a different view, but we ventilated a crop of north of 30 million bags on Conilons for the coming crop. We just had a record crop last year on Conilons. We are, on our numbers on Focafel, we do believe we are walking into a record crop in Brazil for this coming cycle, where numbers are very close to the numbers displayed on the screen, close to 50 million bags on Arabica, 26 million bags of Robusta. Neither Arabica or Robusta is a record crop, but combined is a Brazil record crop. With the outlook of a much larger Robusta crop, with better husbandry and well-capitalized farmers, even with an El Nino, then let's speculate that it wipes out 20% of a 30 million bag crop. That's a 24 million bag crop, and that's a very healthy crop by all means, and perhaps that's the point that Octávio is trying to provoke here. Yeah, so the new planting that increase in land perhaps allow for some adverse effect on weather, while Brazil still produces a relatively decent crop.
Can I just add?
Okay.
I think sustainability is also helping a lot of what Danilo has just said. You know, good farming practices, sustainable sourcing, better practices on the farm level. These will definitely be extremely resilient. But just looking at Danilo's chart there is that, you know, the severe El Nino comes, you know, we could have problems in Southeast Asia, perhaps even more than in Brazil, which is very heavily skewed towards Robusta production. So, well, I think things are more resilient, and sustainability is definitely assisting greatly in this. I do have some concerns regarding El Nino, particularly on Robusta. Not so much in Brazil per se, but perhaps in other parts of the world.
Okay. I will bring more spicy. The production in other countries, not only in Brazil, do you think that the renovation and the area expansion has been a reality also?
I'll talk briefly about that. I'll add that. I'll love you guys to complement. But for me, the most impressive phenomenon, and I'll use the experience in Africa when you explore other regions in the world, is that a windfall of high price, like the ones we've seen the last few years, a place like Ethiopia and a place like Uganda, it translates into an extra hand of fertilizer, which will produce better crops short term. The trees are already there. In a place that Brazil generates new plantings, and farmers able to capture the price of the moment and benefit from that short term. I think in Central America, perhaps a similar phenomenon somehow. What typically doesn't happen in places like Africa is that a lot of seedlings go to the ground. This market is highly regulated at times by the government. You need to have licensed nurseries and so on. It's not a free environment like Brazil that you can produce endless amount of seedlings. Obviously, you need to have the expertise. But Brazil responds to higher prices with coffees being planted. Other countries perhaps respond to better husbandry. Brazil has a high input and high output model, which fertilizer limits how much further you can go, while other countries can react to it in moment one. But on moment two, perhaps if we endure lower prices, that handful of fertilizer won't be there anymore. Productions will reduce in other countries, while that will allow regions that have an ability to actually plant coffee to gain market share longer term. Brazil being one of them, but perhaps others.
Yeah, I asked thinking about the Robusta producers much more than some Arabica and Africans or Central America or Colombia, because linked to the El Nino risk, if it has happened there, the impact might not be so big.
Expand on that, Octávio.
Assuming that Vietnam planted more areas and improved the productivity there, it would be more resilient to the El Nino impact.
The impact of El Nino essentially is is in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Indo, Brazil, the big main players. In Uganda, we see a different scenario. So perhaps that's one of the places that we could see better resilient, more plantings.
Understood.
But once we look into Uganda, Uganda pretty much more than doubled production in the last decade. But Uganda doubled the production because billions of seedlings were produced. Perhaps only 15 to 20% were actually planted. It was a government program that fostered seedlings production to be distributed, not at times to be planted. Yeah, some died. It was there was a big loss there, and with that amount of loss and with government intervention and fostering production, the country was able to more than double the production. So I think the point here is that if there's governmental will and support in some of these countries, you can make a tremendous change. I understand that Vietnam also, entered the coffee world and grow dramatically with a similar phenomena. So I guess factors we can control, but we can see a big change in landscape if there's will.
I've accompanied some of the things that Danilo has seen in Uganda as well, in terms of the projects on the ground and increasing productivity, seedlings, etc. And absolutely right. It is, in certain parts of Africa, this is highly regulated. So you do need governments to work with private enterprise, the local enterprise, to bring it all together. And Uganda is a classic example of that result in doubling the production. And there still is potential for more growth, particularly in these parts of the world.
Perfect. Thank you all for those answers. Still talking about the future, what will be the main skill of the coffee trader of the future?
To list a few, I would say risk management will probably be very high up on the list. Compliance and regulatory environment, particularly what we're seeing across Europe. I think these are very important topics. And then Danilo also touched on this before, technology. Technology, AI, this is all changing very rapidly and will impact, if not already impacting, how we do things. So I think these are three core features: risk management, compliance, regulatory, and technology are the three that I would bring up.
I'm not going to be the trader of the future, so I have to think further of the new generations, what really is interesting for them. And nonetheless, I come back to my original moment when I started in coffee. And coffee is an exciting sector. And it's exciting because it connects people. It's a tangible sector, and I think, and it's a product that as well brings a lot of passion for. And anytime, every year, you learn more. It's you go to the office every day and you have a new learning experience. So, and that's something that is happening now with new generations, that after social networks, the access to technology, everything digital, many of them are looking for something that is more real. And that's something exciting about coffee. Now, which skills do you need to be successful in coffee? Of course, managing how you transform data into good information and do good decisions, risk management, as Alex was saying. But I would talk as well about soft things, which are very important. It is empathy. I would say that's key. How you really connect and understand what is happening and involve with producers and roasters, with the coffee communities, and humbleness. I think the last 4 years has has been a big lesson for many of us, that we keep learning, that we are, no matter if you have been already 30 years in coffee, you know that you are new in the business.
I'd say the adaptability. I think we are required to be more and more lifelong learners. The world is changing, it's evolving. There's AI, there are other things, and our ecosystem will continue to evolve and change. So the ability to be adaptable, to be a lifelong learner is what will, today and tomorrow, be a requirement. I think will is the second one. I think people underestimate how just showing up and consistently showing up, and that's what has forged a lot of leaders that we know and are, here on this audience today. Is will, is consistency, and I think that's a recipe today and in the future. And perhaps another, and I agree with Alejandro, I think with more technology, with the ability to talk on messages and so on, the ability to listen, to relate to people, to look into the eye, to get boots dirty, to have empathy. And I think empathy, a lot of empathy is about simply listening. And I think this combination of soft skills is what probably has a lot of value today, but will continue to have a lot of value in the future.
Yeah, very good. These AI skills or knowledge is very important in this turning point we are living. But for the future, I fully agree with these emotional and human characteristics that will separate the good from the bad, traders or professionals in general. Thank you for the answers. I think it was perfect. I would like to add a simple comment about these concerns that you all made, and I think you covered that very well. But in the consumption, we mentioned the resilient consumption, and that really doesn't concerns me, because I really believe we are in a very healthy business supply chain. My concern is in the opposite side. If the consumption becomes too big for us to react on time to produce enough coffee for that, and we still have that risk. So, generally speaking, I thank you very much for all the answers, and I will make just one last question, but before we finish, I will open for each of you to make final statements, and then I make the last question. So, who goes first?
I'll just share some of what I heard the last few days and has populated some of the discussions. I believe there are certain things about crop and production which are for sure, and we can already see on the trees, and for the ones that had the opportunity to travel a little bit before the conference, they have seen. But we are set for a very interesting 90 to 120 days. Brazil elections will evolve. The El Niño, which is now neutral, will show its face. If it's going to be weak, moderate, severe, and so on. We'll see some volatility in the Brazilian currency. We will test a little bit the waters on the farmer coming into the market on the 60 to 70 days, or as and when that pressure builds. We will see with high Brazil differentials, with not a lot of crop coming out of Central America, what's going to happen with certs, what we're going to have the evolution and depletion possibly with certs, and if that's going to translate into a higher inversion on a lower market, or a higher inversion that drags the flat price out, which could unlock Brazil farmer selling and so on. So there's a lot we're going to see in the next 90 to 120 days, and these variables will evolve at different times and will offer a lot of interesting opportunities, challenges, and will require, as Alex said, for us to manage risk adequately, because that's going to be a feature in the next 6 months.
Say that. Well, we are very grateful for the last 5 years ago, and especially the good prices. I really, if you see what happened, I mean, if the weather crisis in Brazil didn't happen, perhaps the production in other countries will continue coming down. So if that happened later on, the weather issue in Brazil, it would be chaos. It would have been chaos, really, because we have high prices, we have a tight supply, but I think every roaster got their coffee, enough coffee, and every consumer got enough coffee to keep them enjoying what I call my morning wine. So, thanks for these years, and I hope really these prices give us at least some breath for, I guess, in some countries for more 5 years. Countries like Colombia and Central America, because they were badly needed. So, and I hope they will stay, and yeah, have a good collector.
I largely agree with everything my colleagues have just said. I would just like to add that I think price is the best remedy for our market. You know, high prices will correct a certain scenario, low prices will correct another scenario. But just taking one step back from the look on coffee specifically, I find that we are in a very strange place in the world today, particularly from a geopolitical and conflict scenario. This is becoming more in the forefront, and this could lead to disruptions, logistics or otherwise. I think this is something that we need to keep an eye on. We live in a very polarized political world today, just about everywhere you look. And the regulatory environment, you know, this is something that we can always, all of these items we can just wait and see what happens. We're takers of all of these events. So these are things that I think are very interesting, but some concerning at the same time. I would just add that to that.
Well, thank you for your comments. I go for the last question, a very straight one you can think about. What word best defines the market today?
Overconfidence.
Oh, I wish I could say this in more than one word. I would say turbulent.
Very good. And the word I will put out is turning point, an inflection point, crossroads, that describes the level of what we lived and what we think we're going to have. We're at a turning point.
Very good. I don't want to answer with the same word I've been using for 4 years because it's changing. I fully agree that it's a turning point. It's a concerning. We have lots of new things happening, and I could not use the word I used to use, which was vulnerable. But today, I don't think it defines the market anymore. Could be doubt. Could be uncertainty. But I believe that the word for to define this market is management. That's what we need, in my opinion. Because of the uncertainty, because of the turning point, because of the risks. And that's it. I thank you all for the participation. I think we had a very good conversation around the theme. And I hope the audience was able to absorb and like what we promoted here. Thank you.
Thank you, Octávio.
Thank you.
Great. I thought it was great. We actually got a little debate going at some point. So it was good. It was great.
Agradeço a todos os participantes deste painel. Peço por
I'd like to thank all participants, and I'd like to ask them to position themselves for the official photo.
E enquanto isso, vamos ver como ficou a...
In the meantime, let's check out the digital facilitation up here on the screen. Let's see the latest work from our artists. Here is all the content reflected up here on the screen. You can access the material through the app. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.